She's laughing while my son's convulsing on the floor. That's what the ER footage showed. Melissa, my wife, scrolling her phone, sipping iced coffee, while Ethan fought for air. Eyes rolled white, foam bubbling from his lips. Her sister Dana, mocking his seizure, twitching her arms like it was a joke. You baby him too much, Melissa said, smirking. I was kneeling in vomit, cradling our boy, begging 911 to hurry. And those two? They called me the manipulator. The divorce papers came the same night. She wanted custody, after nearly killing him. But I had something they didn't. Records. Years of notes, timestamps, photos. Every missed dose, every skipped appointment. They thought they'd bury me in court. They forgot who builds the foundations. And they didn't know the cameras were still rolling. My name is David Carver, and I'm 45 years old. I manage construction sites by day and monitor medication schedules by night. My son, Ethan, 12 and bright-eyed despite his epilepsy, fills our suburban mornings with quiet laughter. My wife, Melissa, once warm and attentive, now trades whispers with her sister Dana, treating our boy's condition like an inconvenience. The garage workshop has become my sanctuary, where coffee mingles with motor oil and I maintain meticulous notebooks, tracking every seizure, every missed dose, every dismissive comment from the sisters who think I don't notice. 20 years in construction taught me to document everything, though they've never bothered to look at my records. The trust that held our marriage together feels like sand in the gears now. But let me start from the beginning. I was in the garage that Sunday afternoon, rebuilding a carburetor while Ethan watched some superhero movie inside. You know those perfect weekend moments? Just me, my tools, and the satisfaction of fixing what's broken. The air smelled like WD-40 and possibility. That's when I heard the thud. My wrench clattered to the workbench before I even processed the sound. 15 steps from garage to living room. I'd counted them 100 times during Ethan's episodes. Each footfall echoed with the prayer, "Not again, not again." I burst through the door to find my son on the hardwood, body rigid, eyes rolled back white as china. His jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. Foam flecked the corners of his mouth. "Ethan!" I dropped to my knees beside him, hands already moving to cushion his head. Melissa sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Dana lounged beside her, both giggling at something on the screen. Neither had moved an inch. "He's just being dramatic again," Melissa said, not even looking up. "You baby him too much." "Yeah," Dana snickered. Oscar-worthy performance this time. My hands were steady as I rolled Ethan onto his side. Recovery position like we'd practiced. His breathing came in ragged gasps between convulsions. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, counting the seconds between spasms like the neurologist taught me. 911, what's your emergency? My son, 12 years old, severe seizure. The words came automatically while I checked his airway. History of epilepsy. Started approximately 2 minutes ago. Still ongoing. Drama queen, Dana muttered. I glanced at the kitchen counter where Ethan's pill organizer sat. 3 compartments still full from missed doses. My stomach clenched. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes flat. I rode with him, watching every twitch, every labored breath. The paramedic asked about his medication schedule, and I recited it from memory. 2 tablets, morning and night, never more than 12 hours apart. At the ER, they whisked him into an examination room while I answered the intake nurse's questions. Melissa finally deigned to join us, though she spent more time texting than listening. "Has he been taking his medication as prescribed?" the nurse asked, reviewing his chart. "Of course," Melissa cut in before I could answer. "David's just overreacting." Again, the nurse's eyebrows rose as she compared the pharmacy records to our home medication log. I watched her expression shift from professional neutrality to concern. "These numbers don't match up," she said carefully. "The prescription was filled, but according to these logs, he loves this kind of drama," Melissa whispered to Dana, loud enough for me to hear. "Always has to be the hero." Something hot and tight coiled behind my eyes. I'd spent years tracking every detail of Ethan's care in those little black notebooks, and now I knew why. Every missed dose, every dismissive comment, every moment of neglect. I'd document it all, starting with tonight. The ER doctor stepped into the hallway, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Carver, we need to verify his home dosing schedule. Do you have any records of when he's been taking his medication?" Melissa's smirk said she thought she had me cornered. But for once, I was glad of my obsession with documentation. "Yes," I said quietly, "I do." The discharge paperwork took forever. I spent those hours in Ethan's room, watching his chest rise and fall while nurses cycled through their checks. Each time they left, I jotted down their names and comments in my phone. Old habit from construction. Document everything. Trust nothing. I need a copy of his medication adherence summary, I told the discharge nurse. She was older, with kind eyes and efficiency in her movements, the type who'd seen it all and knew which details mattered. Of course. She hesitated, then added quietly, "The pharmacy records show some inconsistencies. You might want to review those carefully." I did. Right there at the nurse's station, I spread out 3 months of records. The pattern jumped out like a bad weld. Missed refills, gaps in pickup dates. On my phone, I pulled up a photo of our fridge chart, the one Melissa was supposed to initial after each dose. The check marks were there, neat and regular. Too regular. "These dates don't match," I muttered, mostly to myself. "Transport issues," Melissa had written on 2 missed neurologist appointments. But I remembered leaving the truck keys, remembered her promising to take him. My hands started shaking, so I steadied them by taking photos. Chart, pillbox, prescription dates, everything. You ever have one of those moments when the past suddenly makes horrible sense? Like when you finally spot the crack that's been letting water into your foundation for years? "You're being ridiculous," Melissa snapped when I showed her the records. "This is exactly why I can't stand your obsession with details. Normal parents don't act like this. Normal parents take their kid to the doctor," I shot back. "Normal parents make sure he gets his medication. If you make a scene about this, if you embarrass us..." She leaned in close, voice dropping to a hiss. "I'll file for divorce so fast your head will spin. Try paying for his special care on a single income." I focused on Ethan instead of answering. He was groggy but alert enough to eat some crackers from the vending machine. I noted the time, the brand, how many he managed. The discharge nurse walked me through his aftercare instructions while I recorded every word in my phone. "He's manipulating you," Melissa said later, watching me help Ethan into his jacket. "He knows exactly what he's doing." The drive home was silent except for Ethan's soft breathing in the back seat. It was past midnight when we pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires. The porch lights cast yellow pools on the concrete, and there, centered on the welcome mat, sat a thick, manila envelope. I knew what it was before I even picked it up. The certified mail sticker confirmed it. Divorce petition. Upstairs, Ethan shifted in his sleep. I stood in our dark entryway, feeling the weight of that envelope like a brick in my hands. The house seemed to tilt around me as I broke the seal. Familiar walls suddenly strange and threatening. The first page hit like a sucker punch. Petitioner alleges respondent exhibits unstable behavior, excessive control regarding minor child's alleged medical needs. My hands were steady as I took photos of each page. Proof, evidence, details. They were all I had left. "Dad?" Ethan's voice drifted down from upstairs, sleepy and uncertain. I tucked the papers into my work bag. "Coming, buddy. Everything's okay." But the floorboards felt unsteady under my feet, and nothing was okay at all. That first morning after the divorce, papers hit. I sat at my kitchen table before dawn, staring at Melissa's petition like it was written in some foreign language. My coffee went cold beside a stack of Post-its and highlighters. Old habits die hard, even when your world's falling apart. You know that sick feeling when you realize someone's been planning your downfall while sleeping next to you? Every page of that petition dripped with calculated malice. Respondent displays obsessive tendencies regarding minor child's alleged medical condition. I had to read that line twice. Alleged. The hospital bills stacked in my filing cabinet felt pretty damn real to me. Then came Dana's statement, typed up neat and official, describing how I appeared to derive satisfaction from portraying my son as ill, and manufactured medical emergencies for attention. My hands shook so bad I had to set the papers down. That woman had watched Ethan grow up, had seen his seizures firsthand, and now she was painting me as some kind of monster. Remember what I said about keeping records? I pulled out my construction site notebook, the one where I logged every medicine, every doctor visit, every time Melissa found an excuse to skip appointments. Fat lot of good it did me when I met with the family law attorney later that morning. "Mr. Carver," she said, adjusting her reading glasses, "I appreciate your thoroughness, but courts tend to favor mothers in initial custody hearings, especially when there are claims of excessive medical intervention. But I have proof. What you have are suspicions and personal notes. What we need are credible witnesses who can testify to a pattern of neglect." She quoted me her retainer fee. My stomach dropped. It was more than 2 months of mortgage payments. I wrote the check anyway. What choice did I have? Back at my desk that afternoon, I pulled up my banking app. The numbers made my throat tight. Savings that had taken years to build were vanishing fast. Specialist copays, legal fees, the retainer, and Ethan's next round of tests coming due. You ever try to put a price tag on your kid's safety? Let me tell you, there's not a spreadsheet in the world that can make those numbers feel okay. I spread everything across my desk: hospital discharge summaries, pharmacy records, insurance claims, neurologist referrals. Each piece told part of the story, but the attorney's words kept echoing. Credible witnesses matter more than paper trails. My computer pinged. Calendar invite for the preliminary hearing. 30 days. I circled the date in red, then marked every medication refill due before then. Time was becoming my enemy, counting down in pills and dollars. That evening I tucked Ethan into bed. His humidifier purred in the corner, casting weird shadows on walls that didn't feel like home anymore. He looked so small against his pillows, too young to understand why his world was shifting. "Dad?" he mumbled, half asleep. "Are we okay?" "We're okay, buddy." I smoothed his hair back. "I promise you'll always have steady ground under your feet, no matter what." Back in my makeshift office, really just the dining room table covered in papers, I updated my expense spreadsheet. The numbers blurred together after a while, each column a fresh reminder of how fast resources could vanish. My phone buzzed. Voicemail from Ethan's clinic. After hours, the nurse's voice was careful, measured. "Mr. Carver, please call me back when you can. There's something you should document precisely." I reached for my notebook, pen hovering over a fresh page. Even through the tinny speaker, I could hear the weight in her words. Something important was coming. Something that needed to be recorded just right. The preliminary conference felt like walking into an ambush. You ever notice how courtrooms smell like furniture polish and fear? The judge's chambers weren't much better. All dark wood and disapproving looks. I sat there in my best site visit shirt while Melissa's attorney talked about concerning patterns of medical hypervigilance. That's fancy lawyer speak for calling me paranoid about Ethan's health. Melissa wore pearls I'd given her last Christmas, looking exactly like the concerned mother she wasn't. The judge, older woman, steel-rimmed glasses, interrupted the performance to check her calendar. "Given the complexity of medical testimony required, we'll set the full custody hearing for," she tapped her screen, "60 days from today." 60 days. 2 months to prove what I knew in my gut. The number hit me like a hammer to the sternum. "Your Honor," my attorney started, "given the immediate concerns about medication compliance, which are merely allegations at this point," Melissa's lawyer cut in, "unsupported by any objective evidence." There it was again. That word. Objective. Like 12 years of watching my son's seizures counted for nothing without the right paperwork to back it up. My attorney laid out what we needed. Documented proof of missed doses, skipped appointments, neglect during medical emergencies, all while maintaining current support payments and my own legal fees. The math made my head spin. "Mr. Carver," the judge fixed me with a look I'd seen plenty of times on site inspectors, "the burden here is substantial. You're alleging serious medical neglect. Without concrete evidence, the court tends to maintain primary custody with the mother." I nodded, throat too dry for words. Outside, traffic hummed past the courthouse windows, life rolling on while mine sat frozen in that mahogany-lined room. That night, I spread everything across my dining room table. Pharmacy records, insurance statements, appointment logs. Started building graphs showing missed refill patterns, trying to make the numbers tell our story. But every column of data felt cold, clinical. Missing the truth of what it meant to watch your child suffer while the people meant to protect him scrolled through their phones. Around midnight, my attorney's email pinged. Melissa's team had sent over a settlement proposal. I could feel them circling, sensing weakness. The terms made my stomach turn. Alternate weekend visitation. Supervised medical decisions. Me paying for the privilege of seeing my own son 4 days a month. For one dark moment, my hand hovered over the accept button. I was drowning in paperwork and bills, fighting a system that seemed stacked against fathers from the start. Maybe if I just gave in. The sound of Ethan's breathing pulled me upstairs. He slept with his arm curled under his pillow, just like when he was little. His rescue meds sat lined up on the nightstand. My careful labels showing dose times, my initials on every cap. I sank into the chair beside his bed, listening to those shallow breaths. The pillbox photo from that Sunday was still on my phone. Evidence of doses Melissa claimed were given, but weren't. The fridge chart with its fictional checkmarks. Little pieces of proof, if I could just make them matter. Something shifted in my chest. I'd walked countless sites with clipboards and checklists. documenting every detail before inspections. This was no different, just another project that needed proper documentation. Back downstairs, I created folders. Medical records, pharmacy records, witness statements, communication logs, everything dated, everything signed, chain of custody noted for each document like I was preparing for an OSHA audit. My phone buzzed on the table, another missed call from the clinic's parent support network. Some name I didn't recognize, tagged as retired paramedic. I'd been too busy drowning in paperwork to return these calls. The screen lit up the scattered papers, casting shadows across all my careful notes and desperate graphs. 60 days suddenly felt like both forever and no time at all. 2 days later, I met Frank at a diner off Route 9. You know the type. Worn vinyl booths, coffee strong enough to strip paint, waitresses who call everyone Hon. He'd picked it because it was quiet in the afternoon lull between lunch and dinner. Frank wasn't what I expected. Mid-60s, barrel-chested, with hands that looked like they'd seen their share of emergencies. He set a battered thermos and a legal pad on the table before sliding into the booth. "Brought my own coffee," he said, pouring a cup. "Old habits. 20 years on the ambulance crew taught me never to trust diner coffee after 2. I managed a tired smile. "Thanks for meeting me. The clinic said you might have some advice. More than advice." He flipped open the pad. "I've got a game plan. My Tommy, he's grown now, but he had seizures from age 8 to 16. His mother tried the same garbage yours is pulling, claiming I was making it up for attention." He tapped his pen on the paper. "But numbers don't lie, and paperwork doesn't play favorites." For the next hour, Frank walked me through building what he called a bulletproof timeline. We started with pharmacy records, not just refill dates, but pill counts and prescription numbers cross-referenced with insurance claims. "See here?" He pointed to a column on the printout I'd brought. "This shows Melissa picked up the refill, but the dose count doesn't match your home log. Document that gap, every single one." The methodical approach felt familiar, like breaking down a complex build into manageable phases. "What about the ER visits?" "Goldmine, if you know what to request." Frank pulled out a form I hadn't seen before. "This lets you get security footage, but there's usually only a 30-day retention window. Move fast on that one." I remembered Melissa and Dana laughing while Ethan seized. My hand tightened on my coffee cup. "Easy," Frank said quietly. "Channel that into the work. Emotion clouds documentation. Stick to facts." We created a system. 3-ring binders with labeled dividers. Everything hole-punched and dated. A daily protocol sheet where Ethan could initial his doses when he was alert enough, and I'd initial the ones I administered. "Medical records are your foundation," Frank explained, showing me how to properly request complete files. "But you need sworn declarations from every provider who witnessed concerning behavior. Make it easy for them. Draft the statements, include specific dates and observations." The waitress topped off our cups. Frank waited until she moved away before continuing. "Timestamps are crucial. When you call 911, note the dispatcher's name and ID number. Same with EMTs, ER staff, everyone. Creates a chain of witnesses that's hard to dismiss." I scribbled notes until my hand cramped. We covered everything from certified mail receipts to how to word records requests narrowly enough to avoid getting stonewalled. "What about sleep?" I asked. "I need to monitor him at night, but I'm running on fumes." Frank nodded. "Military method. 90-minute sleep cycles. Set multiple alarms. Document every check with time, observation, and your initials. Build the pattern of responsible oversight." For the first time since this started, I felt the fog of helplessness lifting. This was concrete, measurable, the kind of detailed planning I understood. "Remember," Frank said, closing his notebook, "facts travel farther than opinions. Let Melissa and her sister talk. You're building something stronger than words." That night, I started implementing everything. Created fresh logs, sent out records requests, scheduled my sleep in 90-minute blocks. Between checks on Ethan, I assembled the first binder. Medical records in chronological order, color-coded tabs, every page numbered. My phone's calendar reminder buzzed. 50 days until the hearing. I locked the binder in my fireproof safe, set my first sleep alarm, and felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. I pulled into our driveway after picking up Ethan's refills. And for a second, my tired brain couldn't process what was wrong. Then it hit me. The empty concrete where our F-150 should have been. That truck had been our family workhorse for 7 years, hauling everything from lumber to Ethan's hospital gear. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "Sold the truck. Had to protect assets before you waste them all on unnecessary medical drama. P.S. This proves you can't manage money. You know that feeling when anger runs so hot it goes cold? That's where I was. I sat in my car, hands steady on the wheel, and made myself breathe. The prescription bag crinkled in my lap as I pulled out my documentation. Notebook. Truck sold without notice, I wrote, adding the date and time. Text received 4:47 p.m. confirming unauthorized sale. I snapped a photo of her message and marked it as Exhibit 42B. Remember that old saying about pride going before a fall? Well, sometimes it goes before a climb too. I wasn't about to let a missing truck derail what Frank and I had built. Called him right there in the driveway. They took the truck, I said when he answered. Expected something like this. Frank's voice had that calm certainty I'd come to rely on. Already made a contingency list. Got a pen? We spent the next hour mapping out logistics. Rideshare accounts for medical appointments, with receipts and driver names logged. A rolling backpack to transport our growing collection of binders. Extra time buffers for everything since we couldn't control our own schedule anymore. Document every extra cost, Frank insisted. Each receipt shows the impact of losing transportation. And David? Get the title transfer records from DMV. Show it was done without your knowledge. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I expanded our timeline. Added columns for transportation expenses, cross-referenced with appointment dates. The familiar rhythm of organizing data helped settle my mind. Next morning, I fired off supplemental requests. One to Melissa's phone carrier for those pill chart photos she'd taken. Metadata could prove when the charts were actually filled out. Another to Ethan's clinic asking them to verify every visit date, including ones we supposedly missed. Need something stronger, Frank said over coffee later that week. Those missed appointments. Get the neurologist to spell out exactly what skipping doses means. He was right. I drafted a careful letter to Dr. Martinez, requesting a formal summary of Ethan's required medication schedule and the risks of inconsistent dosing. Added specific dates we discussed these issues during appointments. 3 days later, Dr. Martinez's response arrived on official letterhead. 5 pages detailing seizure risks, optimal blood levels, and the critical importance of strict scheduling. Pure gold for our documentation. The biggest win came through my inbox on a rainy Tuesday night. Subject line: RE security footage request, ER hallway cameras, confirming existence of requested footage. Your inquiry has been routed to compliance for formal review. I printed the email, hole-punched it, and added it to the appropriate binder. Exhibit 67A. The timestamp from that night was seared into my memory. 8:47 p.m. when they'd laughed at my son's distress. Settling into my new routine. I'd work construction sites all day, pick up Ethan from school in rideshares, then spend evenings organizing evidence while he did homework. The rolling backpack became a permanent fixture, packed with color-coded binders and ready for the next appointment. Rain tapped against the window as I numbered another exhibit. 39 days until the hearing. My kitchen table had become a command center. Stacks of medical records, spiral notebooks filled with timestamps, and calendars marked with color-coded dots for every documented event. The loss of our truck was just one more thing to prove. One more example of putting spite above Ethan's needs. I clicked my pen and kept writing, listening to the steady rhythm of rain and my son's peaceful breathing from the next room. Tell me again about the pill box, Frank said, tapping his pen against a yellow legal pad. We'd turned his kitchen into a makeshift courtroom, coffee mugs pushed aside for stacks of documents. Found it half empty on Sunday, I answered, keeping my voice steady like we'd practiced. Ethan's morning dose was missing, but Melissa's chart showed check marks for the whole week. Frank nodded, scribbling notes. Good. Simple facts, no emotion. Now walk me through the ER timeline. You ever notice how describing something out loud shows you what details matter? As I walked Frank through that Sunday, the key points emerged clear as blueprints. The thud from the living room, the phones in their hands, the exact words they'd said while my son seized on the floor. Write it down exactly like that, Frank insisted, sliding a fresh legal pad my way. Short sentences, just what you saw and heard. I spent an hour crafting that declaration, crossing out anything that felt like judgment or anger. Just facts, times, actions, words spoken. Frank read it back to me twice, helping me trim it down to 2 clean pages. The pharmacy records arrived that afternoon. Talk about perfect timing. The printout showed weeks of gaps between refills, times when Melissa claimed she'd given doses but never picked up the medicine. I spread the papers across Frank's table, matching dates to her check marks. The inconsistencies jumped out like red flags on a job site inspection. This is what wins cases, Frank said, tapping the pharmacy logs. Hard proof that someone's story doesn't add up. We spent the next 3 days organizing everything into binders. Blue for medical records, discharge summaries, doctor's notes, prescription histories. Red for our documentation, photos, declarations, witness statements. Green for official correspondence, court filings, attorney letters, hearing notices. Every page got numbered, logged in an index, and protected in a plastic sleeve. Just like prepping inspection reports for the building commission. Everything findable in seconds. Frank's declaration was the final piece. 23 years as a paramedic, hundreds of seizure responses, clear opinion about proper emergency care. We met the notary at a UPS store. Watched her stamp and seal it official. Index C, Exhibit 12, I muttered, sliding it into place. The binder snapped shut with a satisfying click. That night, I laid out my court clothes, the same dark suit I wore to bid presentations. Ironed the shirt twice, polished my shoes until I could see my reflection. Set 2 alarms. One for 5 a.m., backup for 5:15. Ethan found me in the kitchen, stacking the binders by the door. His eyes went right to them. Smart kid, always noticing details. "Hey buddy," I said, pulling him close. "Tomorrow's that grown-up meeting I told you about." He nodded against my chest. "About my medicine?" "That's right. The doctor's notes and everything so people understand what you need." I kept my voice calm. Matter of fact, it's not about blame. Just about making sure you're taken care of properly. "Like when you check my homework?" he asked. "The simple wisdom of kids, right?" "Exactly like that," I said, hugging him tighter. "Just showing my work, like you do in math." Later, after he was asleep, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, studied the face looking back at me. Tired eyes, sure, but steady. The eyes of a father who'd done his homework, checked his math, and knew his answers were right. Sunrise painted the courthouse steps orange as I walked up, binders stacked in my rolling case. The lobby was empty except for a cleaning crew and 2 familiar figures on a wooden bench. Melissa and Dana sat shoulder to shoulder, designer bags at their feet. They wore matching smirks as I walked past, like this was all some private joke between them. I nodded once, polite but distant, the way I'd greet difficult clients at a job site. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor as I made my way to the security checkpoint, 3 color-coded binders ready with their indexes facing up. The courtroom felt smaller than I'd expected, like a conference room with delusions of grandeur. Wood panels that had seen better days, fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. You know that feeling when you're about to start a major project presentation? Same knot in my stomach, same focus in my mind. "All rise," the bailiff called out. "The Honorable Judge Marshall presiding." We stood as she entered. A woman maybe 10 years older than me with reading glasses on a chain. She had that look I'd seen in veteran building inspectors, someone who'd heard every excuse in the book and wasn't buying any of them. "Calling case number 2023 FC 1847, Carver versus Carver," the bailiff announced. The words echoed off those wood panels like hammer strikes. Melissa's attorney went first, of course. Young guy in an expensive suit, probably fresh out of law school with something to prove. He painted his picture with broad strokes. Me as the obsessive father. Melissa as the concerned mother. Ethan's condition as largely managed, until I started manufacturing crises. I watched Dana nodding along from her seat behind Melissa, like they were rehearsing a play they'd written together. The same superior little smile they'd worn in the ER that Sunday. When my turn came, I didn't waste time on speeches. Just reached for that blue binder and pulled out Exhibit A. Pharmacy records for the past 6 months. "Your Honor," I said, keeping my voice steady like I would at a job site inspection. "I'd like to present documented evidence of medication management." The clerk distributed copies. I could feel the room shift as people started reading. The gaps in refill dates stood out plain as day. Weeks when Melissa claimed she'd given doses, but the pills were never picked up. Judge Marshall studied the pharmacy logs, then glanced at Melissa's medication chart that her attorney had submitted. Her eyes narrowed behind those reading glasses. She looked like my old algebra teacher catching someone's math that didn't add up. "Counsel," she addressed Melissa's attorney, "these dates appear inconsistent with your client's records." While he stammered something about clerical errors, I moved to Exhibit B, appointment verifications from Ethan's neurologist. 3 missed visits when Melissa had been responsible for transport, each one documented with date, time, and staff notes. Frank sat in the gallery behind me, straight-backed and ready. His paramedic experience carried weight. He'd seen thousands of seizure cases, knew proper emergency response inside and out. The declaration in his hand would cut through any claims about me overreacting. That's when I played the card I'd been holding. Your Honor, I respectfully request the court subpoena hospital security footage from the emergency department corridor on Sunday, October 15th, between 2:15 and 3:45 p.m. The judge's head came up sharply. Grounds? The footage will show my son's condition upon arrival and the response of all parties present, Your Honor. Melissa shifted in her chair, first crack in her composure I'd seen all morning. Judge Marshall checked her calendar, then addressed her clerk. Most hospitals retain security footage for 60 days. We're at day 58. Contact their compliance department immediately. I want that footage preserved and transmitted to the court today. The clerk gathered her phone and notepad, heading for the door. The sound of her heels faded down the hallway. I squeezed my pen, focusing on the pressure to keep my hands steady. The next few minutes would matter more than any project deadline I'd ever faced. We will proceed with testimony. While we await the footage, Judge Marshall announced. Her gaze swept the courtroom like a foreman checking his crew. Mr. Carver, please call your first witness. I met Frank's eyes as he stood, ready to be sworn in. His expression was calm, professional, the same look he'd probably worn heading into thousands of emergency calls. In that moment, the whole courtroom seemed to lean forward slightly, like everyone could sense something important was about to break open. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my voice stayed level as I said, "The petitioner calls Franklin Morris, Your Honor." The oath felt heavy on my tongue. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Frank's coaching echoed in my head. Stick to facts, cite sources, give times. My attorney started with that Sunday. Please describe the events of October 15th. At approximately 2:10 p.m., I heard a thud from the living room while working in the garage. I entered at 2:12 p.m. and found my son Ethan in active seizure on the floor. I kept my voice steady, like reading measurements at a site review. My wife Melissa and her sister Dana were present. Neither had initiated seizure protocols or called emergency services. What actions did you take? I walked through each step, just as Frank had practiced. I placed Ethan in recovery position at 2:13 p.m., confirmed breathing, and dialed 911 at 2:14 p.m. EMTs arrived at 2:22 p.m. We reached County General ER at 2:40 p.m. Melissa's attorney tried cutting in with objections about timeline precision, but I had my phone's call log on Exhibit D. Each timestamp matched. During cross-examination, he tried leading me into emotional territory. Isn't it true you've been overly anxious about your son's condition? I can only speak to documented medical requirements, I replied, pulling out the neurologist's care instructions. This protocol specifies response times and dosing schedules based on seizure severity. He didn't like that answer. Tried a different angle. My client reports you've created unnecessary emergency visits. Objection. Calls for speculation. My attorney cut in. Sustained. Judge Marshall nodded. Please limit questions to events the witness directly observed. Frank took the stand next, spine straight as a level. 28 years as a paramedic gave his words weight. In your experience, what are the risks of inconsistent anti-seizure medication dosing? Status epilepticus can develop within hours of missed doses, Frank explained. That's a continuous seizure state requiring immediate hospitalization. Without intervention, it can cause permanent brain damage or death. The scratch of the judge's pen stopped when Frank defined medical neglect. Willful failure to administer prescribed medications or seek emergency care during active seizures meets the clinical definition of neglect and endangerment. I watched Melissa's shoulder tense. Dana's smirk had faded to something uncertain. The heavy courtroom door creaked open. The clerk stepped in, holding a flash drive and an official letter. The tech who followed her wheeled in a cart with a monitor. My pulse jumped as they connected cables to a laptop. The screen flickered blue, then black. A timestamp appeared. October 15th, 2023, 2:47 p.m. The camera angle showed the ER corridor outside room 12. Judge Marshall leaned forward slightly. We'll view this now. The first frame caught my breath in my throat. There was Ethan on the gurney, still twitching as nurses rushed him through the doors. The timecode ticked forward. 2:48 p.m. Me following close behind, rattling off his medication names and doses to the doctor. 2:49 p.m. Melissa and Dana lingering in the hall while staff worked. 2:51 p.m. The nurse emerging to ask about his last dose. Melissa shrugging, checking her phone. Then came the moment I'd tried describing in my declaration. 2:53 p.m. Ethan's arm jerking visibly through the doorway. Melissa and Dana glancing over, then turning back to their phones. Dana's shoulders shaking with laughter as she showed Melissa something on her screen. The timestamp kept running, but I could barely focus past the roaring in my ears. Every detail was there in stark hospital lighting. Their indifference, their amusement, their total disregard for my son's suffering. Judge Marshall's voice cut through the silence. "Stop the playback, please." She turned to Melissa's attorney. "Counsel, would you care to explain what we've just observed?" I forced my fingers to release their death grip on the table edge. The wood was slick with sweat where I'd been holding on, but my exhibit still sat neatly indexed. My documentation still backed every claim. I'd learned long ago on job sites. Careful preparation reveals the truth. You just have to be patient enough to let the evidence speak. The judge picked up her pen again. The scratch of ink on paper filled the sudden quiet as she made notes, and the whole courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The footage kept rolling, merciless in its clarity. Ethan's body jerked on the gurney while a nurse, Sarah, according to her badge, rushed past the camera frame. "Need 0.5 Ativan stat." Her voice came through clear on the audio. My son's hand clutched the rail, knuckles white against the metal. "You know what's worse than watching your child suffer? Seeing others mock. That's suffering." Melissa's laugh cut through the hospital noise. "God, he's so extra about everything." The camera caught her perfect eye roll, the casual flip of her hair. Just like his father. Dana leaned against the wall, phone still in hand. "Right? David's always been dramatic about Ethan's little episodes." She made air quotes around episodes, while my son convulsed not 10 feet away. "It's like he wants everyone to think he's father of the year or something." The gallery behind me stirred, whispers rippling through the wooden benches. I kept my eyes locked on the screen, my hands flat on the table to keep them steady. Every snicker, every dismissive gesture, it was all there in high definition. Then Dana did something I hadn't even seen that day. She pushed off from the wall and did a mocking imitation of Ethan's seizure, her body jerking in an exaggerated dance while Melissa covered her mouth to stifle her giggles. The gasps from the gallery weren't whispers anymore. Someone muttered, "Jesus Christ," loud enough to earn a sharp look from the bailiff. From the corner of my eye, I saw Melissa finally drop her gaze to the floor. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. Judge Marshall's jaw tightened. I'd seen that same look on site inspectors who'd just found critical safety violations, the calm before the storm. Across the aisle, Melissa's attorney's pen had stopped moving entirely. His legal pad abandoned mid-sentence. The footage showed Sarah, the nurse, doing everything by the book, checking Ethan's airway, timing the seizure duration, administering the Ativan with steady hands, all while my wife and her sister stood in the background, faces lit by their phones, sharing whatever was so damn funny on their screens. You'd think watching this would make my blood boil. And sure, part of me wanted to stand up and shout, point at the screen, demand they explain themselves to everyone in that courtroom. But something else happened instead. All that anger crystallized into something cold and clear, like ice forming over a pond. This wasn't just documentation anymore. This was proof. Undeniable, time-stamped audio-visual proof. The last few minutes of footage played out in devastating detail. Every laugh, every dismissive comment about attention-seeking behavior, every moment they chose their phones over my son's care, all preserved by hospital security cameras they never thought to consider. When the screen finally went dark, the silence in that courtroom felt heavy enough to crack concrete. Judge Marshall set down her pen with deliberate care. "Would either party like to make any closing remarks before we recess?" I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "Your Honor, this was never about winning or losing." My voice came out steady, grounded in the truth of what we'd all just witnessed. This was about Ethan's safety, about the basic duty of care every child deserves. The footage speaks for itself. The gavel's tap echoed like a gunshot. "We'll recess for 30 minutes. Everyone rose as the judge left the bench. When I glanced across the aisle, Melissa kept her eyes fixed on some point in the distance. Her earlier confidence shattered under the weight of irrefutable evidence. The security footage had done what months of arguments couldn't, stripped away every excuse, every deflection, every attempt to paint me as the unreasonable one. Frank's hand squeezed my shoulder, reminding me of all those hours spent preparing, documenting, building our case piece by piece. We didn't need harsh words or dramatic accusations. The truth had done all the work for us. 30 minutes felt like 30 years. I paced the courthouse hallway. Frank's steady presence keeping me grounded as my shoes clicked against the marble floor. The same floor I'd walked across nearly 2 months ago, terrified of losing everything. Now each step felt different. Not lighter exactly, but more certain. When the bailiff called us back in, I caught a glimpse of Melissa's attorney whispering urgently in her ear. She shook her head once, sharp and angry, but something had changed in her posture. The confidence was gone, replaced by something closer to dread. "Be seated," Judge Marshall said, shuffling papers on her bench. I forced my hands to stay still on the table in front of me. Having reviewed all evidence presented, including but not limited to the medical documentation, sworn testimony and security footage from Memorial Hospital, this court is prepared to rule. My throat went dry. All those nights of cataloging pills, tracking appointments, building our case piece by piece, it came down to this moment. The evidence demonstrates a clear pattern of medical neglect that placed the minor child at significant risk. The judge's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Mr. Carver has proven himself not only capable of managing Ethan's medical needs but diligent in documenting and coordinating his care. Therefore, this court awards primary physical and legal custody to David Carver, effective immediately. The words hit me like a physical force. I placed my palm flat against the table to steady myself, staring at the papers being handed down by the clerk. Frank's hand found my shoulder again, squeezing once. "Furthermore," Judge Marshall continued, "Mrs. Carver's visitation rights are hereby suspended pending completion of court-mandated medical training and supervised visitation evaluation. The court cannot, in good conscience, allow unsupervised contact given the demonstrated disregard for the child's serious medical condition." I heard a sharp intake of breath from across the aisle. When I glanced over, Dana had her arm around Melissa's shoulders, but her own face had lost its usual smirk. The rest of the hearing passed in a blur of signatures and instructions. Outside in the hallway, I caught fragments of conversations as people filed past. A neighbor I recognized, Carol from 3 doors down, was already scribbling notes from the public docket onto her phone. "The video showed them laughing?" she whispered to another woman, "while he was having a seizure?" I didn't stick around to hear more. There was too much work to do. The next few days became a whirlwind of organizing what I'd already started. Finalizing Ethan's dosing schedule, coordinating with his school nurse, setting up follow-up appointments at the clinic. Every system we documented during the case now became our daily routine. The ripples spread faster than I expected. Tuesday morning, I got a text from a mutual friend. Melissa's law firm had placed her on administrative leave pending review. Wednesday, the mother's group she'd been part of had quietly removed her from their volunteer roster. Someone had pulled the court records, public information after all, and the footage description had people talking. "Dad?" Ethan's voice pulled me back to the present as I tucked him in Thursday night. "Is Mom in trouble because of the video?" I smoothed his blanket, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes our choices have consequences we don't expect. The important thing is that you're safe, and your medicine is on schedule. He nodded, already drifting off. I waited until his breathing evened out before pulling out my phone. The auction listing I'd been watching all week glowed on the screen. Our old truck, the one Melissa had sold to prove I couldn't manage our finances. Starting bid was set low, probably because the dealer wanted a quick turnaround. Bidding opened at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I smiled, remembering all the Saturday mornings Ethan and I had spent washing that truck. Him perched on the wheel well, while I showed him how to check the oil. 9 o'clock couldn't come soon enough. The next morning, I slid my phone across the breakfast table to Ethan. "Remember that sound she used to make? That little knock in the engine when she first started up?" His eyes lit up as he recognized the auction listing. "Our truck." Then his face fell slightly. "But Mom sold it." "She did," I said, buttering his toast. "But sometimes life gives you a second chance. What do you say we go get her back?" You should have seen his grin. We finished breakfast in record time, and I made sure he took his morning dose before we caught a ride to the auction lot. The familiar red paint had dulled a bit under weeks of dealer lot dust, but she was still our truck. Bidding started slow, just me and 2 other guys, neither looking too invested. Maybe they sensed this wasn't just another used vehicle sale. When the auctioneer called sold, at a price well below market, I felt Ethan squeeze my hand. The paperwork took less than an hour, and by noon, I had the keys back in my pocket where they belonged. "First thing," I told Ethan as we climbed in, "is getting her cleaned up proper." The interior had that stale dealer lot smell, but underneath was the familiar scent of leather, and just a hint of the pine air freshener we used to hang from the mirror. We spent the afternoon bringing her back to life. Ethan attacked the windows with Windex while I vacuumed the seats. When we got to the back window, His hand paused over a smudged fingerprint. "That's from last summer," he said quietly. "When we went camping." I watched him trace the old mark before wiping it clean. "We'll make new memories," I promised. The medical go-bag got a proper home in a lockbox I mounted behind the driver's seat. Everything organized just like Frank had taught me. Each compartment labeled, each medication in its place, the emergency protocol sheet laminated and clear. While we worked, word kept spreading about the court hearing. My phone buzzed with texts from people I hadn't heard from in months, all expressing shock about the video, about Melissa and Dana's behavior. The mothers group had officially removed Melissa from their leadership board. The law firm's administrative leave had turned into a resignation request. But you know what? I didn't feel the need to pile on. Didn't need to share those texts or spread the story further. The truth had done its work without my help. Besides, I had better things to focus on. "Hand me that socket wrench, bud," I called to Ethan from under the hood. He passed it down, watching carefully as I made a few final adjustments. "Want to do the honors?" He nodded eagerly. I guided his hand to the key, and the engine turned over smooth as silk. That old familiar knock was still there, but fainter now. Just enough to remind us this was our truck, with all her quirks and history. We sat there in the driveway, listening to her idle. The gauge cluster glowed steady and strong, like a promise. "You can count on me. I'll get you to every appointment. I'll carry your supplies. I'll be ready when you need me, no questions asked." Ethan leaned against my shoulder, and I felt something settle inside me. Not triumph, exactly. More like certainty. The kind that comes from knowing you've built something solid, something that will last. "You know what, son?" I said, wrapping an arm around him. "A real man protects what others discard." He nodded, understanding more than his years might suggest. The engine purred beneath us, steady as a heartbeat, ready for whatever came next.